Hello everyone, I'm bringing you a video today which was somewhat prompted by future plans to take a more in-depth look at some more Canadian equipment. The idea therefore came to me to make a video looking at three different designs of mess tin pouch, and these are obviously from three different patterns of Canadian equipment. The design is very similar, and obviously the concept behind the design is carried across from equipment set to equipment set. We're going to talk about the reasons behind this design, which is fairly unique in Commonwealth terms and quite interesting from that point of view. These weren't exclusively used to carry mess tins, of course. Certainly later on they were used to carry other things as well. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well in the course of the video, but we're going to have a look at these three different patterns of Canadian mess tin pouch. So here we have the three pouches we're going to talk about, and two of these come from sets of equipment which I've talked about on the channel previously, the 1951 pattern and the 1964 pattern, which we have here. And then on the right we have the 1982 pattern, which I'm going to talk about in the not too distant future, all being well, certainly the first issue components of that set of equipment. So the two on the left, well, the one on the left and one in the middle, are really designed from the outset as mess tin pouches, and the one on the right basically takes the design, and it will carry mess tins. It's shaped to carry the mess tins, but was really intended as more of a utility pouch, not exclusively for carrying mess tins, but it still serves the purpose of a mess tin pouch when required. So the 1951 pattern introduced this design basically, and it is essentially a development of 1937 pattern. This pouch was a new design, but using the sort of design features you would see from the 1937 pattern equipment, which were carried over to 1951 pattern. The quick release fastener here at the front, buckles on the sides to allow this to be attached at the brace ends. But 1951 pattern, of course, introduced this feature from American equipment, the hanger hooks, and 1910 type hanger hooks, which obviously attach to eyelets on the belt. So this is quite neatly sized to take Canadian mess tins, as you can see. They fit in there quite neatly. And you can see this particular example is dated 1953. Most of the components are out there are dated 1953, have a Canadian inspection stamp here, acceptance stamp. And that's basically when you start to see 1951 pattern appear. Is certainly some of the first photographs I've seen are of troops heading out to Korea towards the very end of the war, basically for garrison duties towards the end of the war, and obviously the ongoing garrison duties after 1953, after the ceasefire. So that's the 1951 pattern mess tin pouch, which introduced this design to Canadian equipment, and then it was carried forward into these other patterns of equipment we're going to talk about. The reason for this, or one of the reasons behind this, was prior to the introduction of 1951 pattern, Canadian troops had made extensive use of additional water bottle carriers in order to carry mess tins as part of the belt load, rather than carrying them in the haversack of the equipment. And this of course means that they're easier to access, and you can carry certain ration items within them, certainly a brew kit, that sort of thing, stuff for making coffee or tea, and from that point of view, it's quite convenient to have them as part of the belt kit. So even when the haversack is dropped or if it's dispensed with, you still have some rations and the ability to cook or have food served to you in your mess tins, because they're still carried on the belt. So that, as I say, is the 1951 pattern pouch there. We'll move on to the 1964 pattern here, which basically brings the design forward. The 1964 pattern is made in this canvas or cotton duck material, as you can see here. You still have the quick release fastener there, basically the same, but for the fact that the metal components have been swapped out for plastic, which is a feature of the 1964 pattern, the introduction of these plastic fittings, which you can see here. And otherwise, it's very, very similar, just an open pouch size to take the mess tins, as you can see there. And they do fit quite neatly. If I bring these in here, one of these pouches I think has shrunk slightly. It's a bit of a tight fit. It might be this one, but it is possible to get the mess tins in there and close it. Yes, I think it's this one that may have shrunk slightly. The other one I picked the wrong one here, clearly, but it will hold the mess tins, even though it's a little bit of a squeeze to get them in there. And the plastic quick release is not as effective as the metal one, but there you are. It will contain the mess tins, as you can see there. And of course on the back it has the touch and close fastener on the back there, which basically forms a belt loop, which means you can of course lay the belt through here and then fasten the belt loop around it, which means you don't have to slide all the components on and off the equipment. The 1964 pattern has been discussed extensively on the channel previously, and the failings of this design, the various issues with it, have been covered in some detail. During its service life, this pouch would also be used for carrying the rain suit, so waterproofs basically. That was a common use for it as well. and it did serve as something of a utility pouch too. So the 1964 pattern there, carrying across the idea of the mess tin pouch, it ended up being used as something of a utility pouch. So when the design was carried through to the 1982 pattern, it was really considered a utility pouch, and this is a first issue 1982 pattern pouch, utility pouch, still very much the right shape and size to be a mess tin pouch, still using the plastic quick release, and as I'll show you here, you can see the stamp in the top there, rather smudged, but it is there. This will neatly carry the mess tins. Again, as you can see there, nicely sized for it, and a lot easier in fact than the 1964 pattern in terms of fitting the mess tins in there. You also have touch and close on the side of the flap here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. You do also have a double quick release fastener on the front here, so you have this plastic loop down here, which means you can close the flap a lot lower. If you're carrying a smaller load in here, you can reduce the size of the pouch using that. And on the back here, you can see we have a different method of doing things. You do actually have touch and close belt loops again, as you can see here, but these are really to secure this against the belt once it's been clipped in place using these plastic clips here. And this is something we'll look at in an upcoming video looking at the 1982 pattern equipment, how this system works. Basically, there are eyelets along the belt, top and bottom, which these clip into, and then the touch and close belt loops secure around the belt as an extra method of securing it to make sure it doesn't pop off from those eyelets. But these aren't really doing the load-bearing part of the work, they're just stopping this from popping off the belt. If I remove the mess tins from this, we'll talk a little bit more about the fasteners here. So it's quite neat in that you have obviously both a hooked and a soft section of the touch and close on both the flap or lid and the side of the pouch here, which means these can be fastened together to reduce down the opening there, and these side pieces can also be folded in and fastened together like this, and then the whole thing can be reduced down using the lower quick release like that. If I can fasten this here, looking through the camera, there we go. So the whole thing reduces down like that to be a lot neater if you're carrying a load that just takes up the bottom part of the pouch. So quite a neat element of the design there, as you can see. Just gives a lot of adjustment in terms of fastening this depending on the load carried in the pouch, and that really makes it something of a utility pouch. As I say, it is more of a utility pouch, it's what it was intended as, rather than just a mess tin pouch, much as it is sized basically perfectly for accommodating the aluminium mess tins which we have here. So that is a look at these three different versions of the mess tin pouch, as I say, moving through to a utility pouch, again due to the changing use of this pouch as the equipment sets developed. Initially intended purely for the mess tins, and then, as I say, as time went on, used for carrying other things, and eventually used basically as a utility pouch with the 1982 pattern equipment. And as I say, the 1982 pattern equipment will be considered in more detail in a video going forward. But that's a look at these three different pouches. So there we are. As I say, I find the mess tin pouch an interesting element of these Canadian designs. The fact it was perpetuated through three different patterns of equipment, quite interesting in and of itself. The origins of this, obviously, in Canadian troops using water bottle carriers to carry their mess tins as part of the belt kit rather than in the haversack. An interesting element as well that was sort of formalised with these specific pouches. And as I say, fairly unique in terms of Commonwealth equipment design from that point of view. And I find them interesting for that reason. I do hope you found it interesting looking at these as well. If you have and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as ever, a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It really is greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.